Good day everyone, and welcome to the channel. It's Londononion here with a Back 4 Blood weapons review, and in this review we're going to be looking at our second LMG, the M249. Now as part of today's discussion, we're going to be including my proposed weapon center deck build, following the review. Now although the stats and specs of the weapon speak for themselves, I will be giving my evaluation on the weapon's capabilities in combat. This will involve tactics that suit the weapon's strengths, and an overall score. Now, evaluation will take place on 4 main fronts: ammunition economy, crowd control, pressure combat, and mutation deterrence. Before we get started, it is important to note that a weapon's shortcomings can be supplemented with one's card selection, but evaluation will mainly be geared toward the weapon's base attributes. Additionally, one's character choice can make a weapon somewhat more forgiving, meanwhile difficulty selection can accentuate or soften the downsides. So starting off with the 249's ammo economy, which is essentially how long a weapon can practically last throughout a given level. The M249 is an automatic light machine gun that holds a massive 80 rounds per magazine. Now there are natural benefits to having a large magazine capacity. However, as far as ammo economy goes, this is a major disadvantage due to how cumbersome the magazine is on its own. The fire rate of the 249 is high but not uncontrollable. If anything, the fire rate seems most relatable to that of the M4 assault rifle. From a psychological standpoint, with 80 rounds in a magazine and a fast fire rate, superfluous fire is painfully easy to fall into. As far as damage goes, the 249 inflicts 14 units of damage within 17 meters, and will recede to a minimum of 9 units beyond 17 meters. In short, each ridden will require 2 rounds, regardless of ferocious and monstrous corruption cards. Looking at the hip fire reliability, the M249 actually gets more accurate as one continuously fires. Ironically, while aiming down the sights with automatic fire, the weapon becomes considerably jittery and will diminish one's accuracy beyond close range. Now, if you ask me, there are limited reasons why the M249 would or should be used for automatic fire: mutations, impending crowds, and bosses. Otherwise, to ease the major tax on ammunition, single fire is a viable and relatively simple tactic. Moving on to crowd control. Depending on one's corruption cards and main events in a given stage, crowd control will be more or less an important constituent in one's survival. Higher difficulties will likely create a greater need for effective crowd control. The M249 probably has the greatest advantage when circumstances demand crowd control. With such a high magazine of 80 rounds and 2 rounds per target, not including critical shots, even beyond close range, nothing else really compares. But remaining objective here, the reload speed is also the greatest detriment, as it is easily the slowest in Back 4 Blood. However, there does seem to be a bit of a pro tip / possibly an exploit that few other weapons possess. While reloading the M249, once the chain of rounds are added to the chamber, the reload animation can be interrupted with a quick double tap of the weapon swap button and cut an estimated 30% of the reload time off, and the weapon can be operational again. Now, the reload speed, as it is intended to be displayed, is quite a disadvantage, but the magazine capacity naturally compensates. The pierce of the weapon is decent enough, inflicting 10.5 units of damage to second targets, meaning that firing into a crowd is a valid strategy for handling them quickly or using a bottleneck method for handling crowds. The mobility of the weapon is on the lower side, but not completely cumbersome. But again, with an insane magazine capacity, not including attachments, the low mobility is essentially compensated for already. A secondary is still good to have with the painful reload speed. Chances are, however, reloading will be a minimal occurrence unless a crowd is continuous. But this is a team-based game. Moving on to pressure combat, as I coined the term, this refers to how efficiently a weapon can eliminate targets in multiple areas, or how well a weapon can complement one's ability to engage and eliminate multiple scattered targets at varying ranges. The M249 has decent ability to perform pressure combat. The range of the weapon is high, allowing versatility with targets at varying ranges. The high magazine capacity will also allow one to perform pressure combat for a long period of time. Not including user error, and with 2 rounds per target, the M249 makes a great defensive weapon. As discussed in ammo economy, the best way to make use of the weapon is to employ single shots. Given the attributes of the weapon, although far-range shooting is an option, it may be an inefficient use of time, since each target will require at least 2 rounds. Also, just like with crowd control, the weapon falls flat when it comes time to reload, though the reload is considerably more forgiving if using the interruption method explained earlier. Moving on to mutations, the M249 puts up a decent fight against mutations, but each target will take time to put down, especially tall boys. Now, the magazine capacity helps in this regard. It will apply constant damage where most other weapons would require a reload. But even with this said, the damage is mediocre at best, and one will find themselves holding the trigger for extended periods of time for a single mutation. Also, there is nothing worse than being caught off guard with low ammo against tall boys and reekers, since the reload animation takes about a week to complete. Regardless, not factoring in significant user error, the M249 can easily gun down 2 mutations depending of course on their variety and distance. It's because of this I struggle to classify the M249 as a fighting weapon, but instead a hybrid. Without sufficient distance, it's easy for mutations to issue their attack or charge through one's fire. Unfortunately, this weapon does not have much stumbling capability without the appropriate attachments, so distance is the one variable that must be controlled for in order to reduce hazards and maximize the M249's abilities. It is, after all, more of a defensive weapon than it is a charging weapon. Moving on to the scoring, the M249's ammo economy is in the poor range. This is most evident in an early game with minimal card effects, especially if playing online, as ammo will be quickly soaked up by the weapon. So I give it a 1 out of 5. Crowd control is an area of high performance. The magazine size is the major trump card that compensates for virtually everything, even the painfully slow reload, plus the shot to kill ratio is at a fair 2-for-1. So I still give it a 5 out of 5. For pressure combat, the M249 is competent in every constituent. The only downside is that each target will require 2 rounds, making far-range shooting an inefficient use of time. Close to mid-range shooting is the sweet spot, so I give it a 4 out of 5. As for mutations, the M249 has the ammo on its side, but not so much the efficiency or stumbling capability. With sufficient space, however, the M249 can manage multiple targets with a single magazine, but it is not a fighting weapon. So I give it a solid 3 out of 5. Overall, this puts the M249 at a 13 out of 20. Now that concludes the review, but we will now transition into our deck build for this weapon. Now, generally I would say there are 2 aspects of building a weapon/weapon class specific deck. There is the more strength-based build, and the compensatory/balancing build. A third option would naturally be a hybrid, which is probably the most reasonable, but every weapon is different and has its own strengths and areas of need to varying degrees. Now, with this in mind, on a smaller scale, I will categorize potential card selections into 4 designations: related, compensatory, synergistic, and preferential. Although Back 4 Blood already has designations for cards, I prefer to use my own. And before we get started, it is important to note that there are 1,000 ways to build a deck. The most I can do is showcase how I prefer to optimize this weapon's performance. So starting off with the related cards. Related cards are the ones that directly impact/buff the attributes or effects of a given weapon class. The cards in this category are Meat Grinder and Tactical Vest. Meat Grinder increases move speed and accuracy by 30% while crouching and using an LMG. Tactical Vest increases damage by 10% and rifle ammo capacity by 30%. Crouching naturally will increase the reliability of hipfire. As discussed in the review, the M249 becomes more accurate with continuous fire. However, without attachments or cards, the weapon will take some time to become accurate as the crosshairs gradually become tighter. Increasing accuracy will speed up this process by tightening the base crosshairs. The added movement speed will also reduce the burden of traveling slower due to crouching. As for Tactical Vest, the M249 does not have particularly high damage, but not low either, despite its description. If you ask me, the descriptions are not always helpful, since even the AK-47 has the same maximum damage per round, but is described as having high damage. But I digress. Given the low economy of the M249, having increased ammo capacity can only be of benefit. Now moving on to the Compensatory Cards. Compensatory Cards are meant to counteract the weapon's main weaknesses, or balance out its areas of need. In the 249's case, based on performance, mobility, reload speed, handling, ammo capacity, and to some extent accuracy will be the main areas of need. To help cover these areas, I choose to employ Admin Reload, Shooting Gloves, Hellfire, Ammo Mule, Ammo Scavenger, Dash, and Hunker Down. Admin Reload automatically reloads your stowed away weapon. Shooting Gloves buffs weapon swap speed by 25%, recoil control by 15%, and accuracy by 15%. Hellfire increases move speed by 45% while firing and 3% while not firing. Ammo Mule increases ammo capacity by 75% but comes with a movement penalty of 5%. Ammo Scavenger increases the frequency of ammo spawns. Dash increases move speed by 5%. And lastly, Hunker Down increases damage resistance by 10% and accuracy by 40% while crouched. Now, Admin Reload is going to be a staple when using this weapon, and the increased swap speed from Shooting Gloves should aid with this without having to watch the reload animation in high volume circumstances. Unfortunately, Back 4 Blood is limited in its recoil control cards, with the only alternative being Line 'em Up. But the card is almost a squander with the other benefits it provides that the 249 does not exactly need. In regards to accuracy, the M249 will have a grand total of 85% increased accuracy while crouching, otherwise only 15% while standing. Practically, this means that most targets won't require ADS to effectively hit them. However, the option is still there to aim down one's sights if attempting to perform precision kills, fire at a further than usual range, or use single shots. As for mobility, this one was interesting while testing with this deck. While standing, move speed sits at a 3% surplus, and while firing, only 45%. When crouched and firing, however, move speed will be increased by 75%. What this essentially means is that it is considerably faster to crouch and fire than to stand and fire. For example, if a wretch is attempting to vomit in your direction, aside from sprinting of course, it is much faster and safer to fire while crouched than to stand and strafe. This can make fighting through a crowd much easier and increase the merit of evasive fire against tall boys or, as I just described, wretches. Moving on to the synergistic cards. These are cards that have impacts to increase areas of strength, or work to optimize the effects of other cards or one's choice of character. The cards I chose for this category are Shredder, Confident Killer, and Marked for Death. Shredder increases bullet damage by 1% for every connected round and stacks up to 15% provided rounds connect within 3 seconds of each other. Confident Killer increases damage output by 1% for every mutation killed, and stacks up to 15% for the duration of a given level. Marked for Death increases damage against pinged enemies by 10% for one's team. Overall, one can theoretically inflict an additional 50% with the inclusion of Tactical Vest in damage output. An important note here is that the damage percentage is not where the strength necessarily lies, but in the magazine capacity. The M249 will benefit from Shredder greater than virtually every other weapon, since it will have 65 spare rounds to inflict the maximum effective damage, not including the other cards. Just like our note about the Barrett, bosses are not a point of evaluation, but they are worth mentioning. The M249 can make quick work of bosses since there are fewer lulls in fire and maximized damage effects. Our last area of card selection is the Preferential Cards. These are cards that are completely unrelated to the weapon and its strengths/weaknesses, but can still be considered useful perks, and this is where the most nuance can take place. Given that we have 3 slots left, I choose to give it to Down in Front, Body Armor, and Durable. Down in Front eliminates friendly fire, both given and received while crouched, and increases health by 10 units. Body Armor increases trauma resistance by 20%, and Durable increases trauma resistance by 15% and health by 5 units. Given the other cards that become active with crouching as well as the nature of the M249, Down in Front will naturally reduce hazards with automatic fire. Especially since this is mainly a defensive weapon, it can be easy to spray on allies. Trauma resistance will ease the burden of mutations that manage to close the distance and inflict damage, and comes to a grand additional total of 35%. Now, our last area of discussion is the character choice. Given our card selections and the review for the M249, this build is primarily for Hoffman, Mom, and Doc. Hoffman is a character of contingency and preparedness. He has a natural perk of increased team ammo capacity by 15%, an additional offensive inventory, and chances to find ammo or offensive throwables when eliminating Ridden. This is perfect for a weapon that has terrible gas mileage. Mom and Doc are both similar in that they are intended to be a given team's anchor. When everyone else goes down, they don't, but instead heal and maintain their team, so they are naturally defensive players. Mom comes with an additional support inventory slot, provides 1 extra life to her team, and can instantly revive a fallen cleaner to full health once per level. Doc, on the other hand, has increased healing efficiency by 20%, 25% trauma resistance, and has the ability to heal 25 units of health to each cleaner once per level. The only alteration I would make in the current deck build for Mom and Doc is switching out Ammo Scavenger with Medical Professional, which allows first aids and defibs to recover 15 units of trauma damage and grant an extra life. But as I said, guys, there's 1,000 ways to build a weapon-centered deck. These were just my preferences. Otherwise though, that concludes the build. Thank you guys for joining me on this one, and in our following videos, we'll be revisiting the M4 Assault Rifle ever since our update in February, and afterwards we'll be progressing into our critical weapon comparisons, where I'll be analyzing 2 weapons of similar performance and determining which is ultimately the bigger stick. I'd highly recommend checking out my comparison between the Ranch Rifle and M1A Sniper Rifle for further understanding. And also, as a small note, I will attempt, of course, to try to compare weapons that are within the same class, so as to avoid too much controversy. And if any of you have any suggestions for critical comparisons, feel free to share in the comments below, and I'll see what I can do. Otherwise though, it's been Londononion, and I will see you guys next time.